to be discussing S.O.S. I have a problem tenant. What do I do now? You're not going to run. You're not going to hide. Today, you are going to learn the answers. So let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. All right. So today's training will cover the problem. So you've got a problem tenant. The short-term solution, what to do right now, our 5 steps to stop the bleeding if you are in this mode right now.
And then we're going to workshop 3 real-life examples that we face on a regular basis, and then give you the bigger picture, which is the most important thing you can glean out of this training, is how can we avoid getting here in the future.
That's true. And just a couple quick housekeeping items. We've got people on Zoom, people on Facebook. If you have a comment, drop it in either chat. We're going to go through our 5-step solution, and then we're going to take Q&A at the end. So drop your questions anytime.
So the first question I'd like to ask you and have you just consider for a moment is, what type of problem tenant have you had, do you have, or are you afraid of having? And then thinking about that for a moment, and also asking yourself, how does that make you feel? And we can tell you for time and time again that landlords, when they come to us, they feel worried, uncertain, and frustrated. More than anything else, they are frustrated.
And we work with landlords of all levels. We've seen from your brand new investor who's bright and shiny and just looking to figure it out, to your experienced investor who owns millions of dollars of real estate. And they all have the same concern: a bad tenant, a problem tenant, concern about the future, uncertainty, and feeling frustrated.
And this pain isn't necessarily relegated to the rental. It bleeds into their marriage or their relationship, how they perform at their job, and also other aspects of their life, like kids. We have a client who's pretty active in our Foundation Homes portfolio, and he came to us because his rental portfolio was giving him so much heartburn that his wife said, "Hey, look, you need to figure this out." So he got a property manager, and she was so excited because not only were they're obviously husband and wife, but they're also business partners. And she wanted him to get a property manager, not for him, but for her, because everything else was falling apart and it was affecting their marriage. Is totally transformed now, which is awesome. And she's so happy that we're involved.
And this is not a pitch for property management, right? You're here because you want to learn about managing your rental yourself. This is a pitch about mindset and getting you to think about considering a mindset shift in how you approach the management with your level. This was not a newbie investor, but it's just a great example of how frustration with your rentals can bleed over into the rest of your life if you don't take action and do something.
Exactly. So the wrong mindset will create more problems. So let's get into the solution. Here are our 5 steps to handle a problem tenant. Number 1.
The first step, you need to call the tenant. Maybe you discovered something on an annual inspection or a walkthrough. Maybe your plumber reported something. Maybe your neighbor has reported something. The first step, if there's trouble a brewing, is you need to call the tenant. You need to hear what their concerns are. You need to hear what the result is that they are trying to get out of this.
And you don't want to hit the mute button or avoid it or just build up resentments. Communication is key, and it can solve a lot of problems. And the best way to do that is to call them, because email and or text can seem a little bit more confrontational.
Yeah. So at this step early on, and Christopher hates it when I use this phrase, but I've used the phrase snoop and poop.
Snoop and poop.
You're trying to figure out what can you glean from the tenant about what the real motivation is that's causing this problem. So like one quick example would be, we have tenants right now, this just happened 2 days ago in a high-end property, and we had an electrician go there for a problem, and then he called us back, or our property manager, and reported, hey, these tenants have installed a electric charging station for their electric cars, and they didn't get our permission, and they did it without a licensed electrician, and they did it without pulling permits. And he said that this, whatever electrical upgrades they've made, is causing the problems with what he was then called in to deal with.
Yeah.
So we have a problem on our hands. So the first step that our property manager took was call the tenants. Hey guys, what's going on? What are you trying to accomplish here? It's pretty obvious what they were trying to accomplish, but we need to hear from them.
Yeah, exactly. What they're looking for, and try to figure out a good resolution that benefits everybody. Step 2, consult your lease. Your lease contract, if it was written recently, or and if it's written well, will have terms in that you can leverage to fall back on. So for example, if they have unauthorized occupants or unauthorized pets, or if they've made modifications, as we just discussed, to the property without permission, the lease contract should address that and let them, and you can go back and say, hey, look, you're currently in violation of your lease. Let's figure out a way to make this right. But you can always leverage that, because oftentimes tenants can say, well, look, it's my right to do this, or I can do that. And if your lease contract says something different, that's what is going to be the most valid point you can make.
And this is really important for our landlords who often start to bring the emotion into this, right? One of the most common things we hear from a DIY landlord is, how could my tenant do this to me? How can this be happening to me? And that's a victim mindset, right? This is a business, and this is what we teach all the time in the landlord code, is you need to treat your property like a business. So in a business, if things are going wonky, you're going to look back to your contracts, right? You're going to look back if you're having a problem with a vendor, you're having a problem with a supplier, you're having a problem with a client,
or an
you're
employee.
going to look at your employee, you're going to look at your contract.
Step 3, analyze and compare. What are the pros and cons of making exceptions or compromises? So we'll use the example of having an unauthorized pet as an example. Now, if this tenant has otherwise been great, has cared for their property, has paid rent on time, and they're looking to stay in your property longer term, you may want to make the exception to write something into your lease that says, hey, now they've got a pet, or compromise. Maybe they're paying a little bit extra for that pet to be at the property. If you're absolutely no pets, no dogs, then you're going to also have to consider, well, what does it mean if I terminate this tenancy? How is that going to impact my bottom line at the end of the year? If I have to go through another lease up, another turnover, what's the cost of vacancy? So you want to look at all these points as you make your decisions of whether what you're going to do, if you're going to make an exception or compromise based on the terms of the lease contract.
Right. So step 3 is where we really want you to practice taking the emotion out of it. And sometimes it can be helpful to bring in a friend, maybe not a spouse. If maybe things are getting a little tense about this, maybe you guys disagree, bring in like a neutral party to run the scenario by. And again, you really want to think about it as a business. What is the financial cost to me as a business? Does this help or hurt my business? Another good example at this point, and we've seen this come up many times over the years, is a tenant moves in, and then as they're moving in, they realize there's no blinds in the master bedroom. And they say, I'm so mad, I need blinds, you need to give them to me. So step 1, you're going to call the tenant and say, okay, what are we trying to get here? They're going to try to get blinds, right? That's the result they want. Step 2, you're going to look at your lease. Does your lease call for blinds? It does not call for blinds. In fact, if you have a good lease, it's going to say, like, these are the only things that are listed here that are included with your lease. And the tenant accepts the condition as in, if you've done your move-in, your proper move-in inspection, right? So you've got the paper to back up and the contract to back up your position. But then you got here to step 3 and you think, okay, is this going to help or hurt my business? With losing these tenants and pissing off these tenants, is this going to make my life easier and my life running this business easier, or is it going to make it harder? How much would this actually cost me? Is this going to improve my asset in a way that helps my business? So do you need to pay for these blinds? No, you don't. Your contract says you do not. And I'm sure you told the tenants this when you showed them the property and they heard otherwise. So do you have to? No. But should you? Well, maybe there's a compromise. Maybe they pay for half and you pay for half. And the agreement is they stay at the property when they leave. Maybe the tenants pay for it in entirety and they take it with them, or you purchase them at 1/3 the cost when they leave. Something like that. But that in the long run is something that would improve your assets. So that maybe is a good business decision to make because it improves your asset, keeps your tenants happy, and everyone moves on.
Yeah, and I always like, just to tailor that example a little bit further, I always like to start off when I have these conversations with my clients, is like, start off with the worst case scenario. A set of blinds for your master bedroom is can run as much as $1,000, $1,500. It could be as cheap as $500. And if you look at that cost, and if the tenants are just moving in, spending $1,000 to remedy issues with your tenant going forward, or show them that you are a good person and that you care about them being happy in your property, is going to pay dividends going forward. I promise you.
But $1,000 probably. I mean, in this particular example, you could spend less
and then work backwards in terms of, like, let's see what kind of compromises. Maybe we can negotiate half or something like that. So just think about those terms. Step 4, put it in writing. So I can't drive this home enough. Once you've had the conversation with the tenant, you've acknowledged them, you know the result that you're both looking for, and you've come to a resolution, You want to follow this up with an email or text, preferably an email saying, "Dear tenant, thanks so much for getting on the phone with me today. I heard your problem was X, Y, and Z. This is the solution that we came up with. This is the time frame under which we're going to accomplish the solution, and this is the cost it's going to cost you and cost me. I look forward to getting this taken care of for you very soon." The end.
And also, to be clear, you may not be having this discussion live. Like we mentioned, call the tenant. That's step one. When you come up with your step three, your analyze, your compromise, in this step, you could just be presenting the compromise, right? Because if you get the tenant back on the phone, it may become more of a negotiation, and that may be harder for some landlords who have a harder time maybe drawing that line in the sand, right? So put in your response in email. This is your problem. I heard you. We've thought about it, or I've thought about it. Here's the compromise I'm willing to put out, and here's the cost, like Christopher said, to you and me, and here's the timeline. You want to make everything as clear as possible while keeping in mind that everything you put in writing is something you're going to need to stick to, right?
Exactly.
So don't say, "I'm going to get you blinds," and don't get the blinds. Don't say you can have the dog and then change your mind. Put it in writing, and that's now what's going to happen.
In addition, if after that phone call or during that phone call, you heard what they have to say and you have to think about it or consider a solution, you also want to let them know, "Hey, we discussed this on this day. As we discussed, I'm going to be considering this over the next day or two, and I will be getting back to you, whatever." So these are things that you want to make sure you put in writing so it's clear and you can fall back on, because as Darcy said, once it's in writing, it's cement. All right. Step 5.
This would be the notice of violation. So in your step 3, when you're analyzing and deciding what's best for your business, there are a number of problems out there where the best move is to start the process of eviction. Now, we all know—
Or 3-day pay or quit or cure or quit.
Right, but which would be taking you on the line to, you have made peace with the fact that the ultimate result here may be an eviction, because the problem is big enough that that is the path that you have to go. So step 5 is, if it's applicable, and this is not applicable in every scenario, but if it's applicable, you're going to be serving the notice of violation or non-compliance, or whatever the notice looks like for that particular property. And we're going to workshop this in 3 real life examples so you can see what we mean. In the example we gave of the blinds, there's probably not a notice served, right? Because the tenants are not violating anything. You're just solving that by your email correspondence, step 4, and saying, "This is what we're offering," and then you guys are negotiating back and forth to see if that works. But there's no violation there. In the event of an unauthorized pet, if you've decided they cannot have this pet, then you are serving a terms of notice, whatever the violation.
Cure or quit.
Well, depending on what the state is, what your particular laws
Sure.
are around that. But you have made the business decision that you are okay heading down the eviction path or loss of tenant path, because this violation and this problem is serious enough that either the tenant needs to stop it or eventually get out. And what you're going to do is start building your paper trail to protect yourself and your asset on your path to getting that tenant out.
And step 5 is like, not everybody needs to go to step 5. Step 5 is like the last resort.
You don't want to be at step 5.
If you can avoid step 5, avoid it. But step 5 is the last resort.
And it's how you enforce a lease, right? It's not something to be afraid of. It's just something to, you may be consulting an attorney about, and it's something to weigh carefully to make sure that's what you want to do.
Why? Because it's a business, right? So now we're going to get into the 5 steps to handle a problem tenant.
We're going to workshop with
Workshop with you. So just to go over this again, you call them, you review the lease, you analyze and decide whether or not you're going to compromise, evaluate the pros and cons. You follow up in writing, and worst case scenario, you serve notice. So let's workshop 3 common problems.
Let's do it.
Number 1, late or unpaid rent, lease violations, and property damage. Does any of this sound or look familiar to anybody? Has anybody ever had to deal with any of these 3 things before?
I'll tell you, in our property management portfolio, I mean, we have some of this going on, but most often our experience with this is when a client who's been managing their own property comes to us, and we're essentially inheriting a problem tenant. And so these are all the steps we're going to take to start to turn that tenancy around.
All right. So let's talk about lease violations. The most common lease violations that we run into are unauthorized occupants and unauthorized pets. That is a mean, vicious-looking Chihuahua.
It is. It looked a lot like our Chihuahua before she passed. Let's go with unauthorized occupants, because we talked about pets a little bit.
Great.
Okay. So we're going to workshop the 5-step process here. So let's say you're doing an inspection or a neighbor calls, whatever, you become aware that there's an unauthorized occupant in your property.
The first thing you're going to do is call the tenant.
Call the tenant.
Find out what's going on.
What's going on?
Hey, I noticed that you have an extra 5 cars at your property. The neighbor notified me that the same person keeps coming out. They're spending the night, whatever that may be. I just want to find out what's going on before I draw any conclusions that may or may not be true.
So the tenant may say to you, and we had this come up in San Francisco recently, oh, we moved a roommate out and we're moving a new roommate in, and oh, can you put him on the lease? So not ideal, right? We, in this case, found out after the fact, super not ideal.
They already had possession.
This new tenant, unauthorized tenant, already had possession of the property. Everyone knows we've got extenuating circumstances right now across America when it comes to evictions. So as a landlord, your back is a little bit against the wall when you are in the step 3 analyze compromise scenario of this. So in this particular scenario, called the tenants, found out there's a new tenant in there. They want him on the lease. Number 2, review the lease. We didn't need to because we already know what's in the lease, but
you would want to review the lease
what
to
does
see
your lease say?
what does your lease say. If the lease says, hey, I can have up to 2 roommates in here, well, you have to honor that. If it says this lease is just supposed to be for John and Jane Smith, and John and Jane Smith are living in the property, and Bill Adams is now there, well, then you need to make a decision. And that's when you start getting to step 3.
Analyze and compromise. So let's say your lease specifically says no unauthorized occupants. So you know that technically, as the landlord, you are in the right, and you could start through the process of whatever it looks like in your state, serving a cure or quit notice, meaning tenant needs to go, you're in violation. If you don't, we're going to start down the process of eviction. That's one step you could take. The other step you could take would be
to write this person in on the lease as an occupant, making them both jointly and severally liable for the lease, meaning now they have to go through the application process. You want to make sure you know everything about this person. They're on the contract, and if anything happens with damage or anything else, they're also going to be on the hook to remedy that, to cure that issue.
So in the case that the example that we gave, ideally in the past, we probably would not have moved in or accepted an unauthorized occupant. In this particular case, I think the guy even had 1 late rent payment on his history. It was not an occupant who normally we would welcome into our properties. However, since the tenants had already gone ahead and moved him in, and we can't evict anyone right now anyway, because it's San Francisco, we spoke to the landlord, we compromised. Yeah, this is in California. And we said, well, it's better to have this guy and his social security, have him, since he's already there and there's really nothing we can do about it. It's better to have him on the lease and have him additionally responsible than to just not acknowledge him, which is a strategy and people in rent control areas might need to take for specific rent control reasons. But again, because of the unique extenuating circumstances regarding eviction moratoriums throughout the country right now, that was a compromise that we had to make and our client had to make due to this certain circumstance.
Under normal circumstances, if this happening, the compromise and the pros and cons that you're going to want to consider are what's going to be the cost of the eviction, because that's not cheap, versus continuing to get the same rent that you're getting and maybe renegotiating this contract at the end of their existing lease term. So termination of a contract, evictions are very, very prickly. They're painful, and they do cause a lot of problems and stress. So you just want to evaluate all things, not just the financial issue, but also how that's going to weigh on your mind.
Right.
Once you've identified what you're going to do, you want to follow it up in writing.
So in this case, we followed up in writing. We had the tenant go through our application process. We put him on the lease. And in this case, no notice serving step 5 was not necessary because we were able to compromise.
Great.
Okay, so next example.
Late rent, or they haven't paid rent.
So this is a big one right now. We know it's a hot button, and this is the strategy, and the steps you have to take here are a little different right now because of the extenuating circumstances, and it varies from state to state.
By the way, if anybody has had to deal with a rent being late or non-payment of rent by a tenant, I just want you to, if you can, throw a thumbs up in the chat or a high five or
a thumbs down,
or just type a letter in the chat, whatever you want to do, just to let us know that you've been here before, man.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to answer this one. I want to address 2 scenarios with this one.
Sure.
So the first thing you're doing, rent's late, you're calling.
You're going to call. Hey,
where's your rent?
What's going on with the rent? I usually say, hey, it's the 5th or it's the 2nd or it's the whatever. It's the end of the day on the 1st. You're typically on time. Hey, I just want to let you know your rent hasn't right. Is there something going on? Do I need to be aware of something?
Right. Oh, it's coming. Okay.
I'm sorry. My bank did this thing, or I'm on my way to the office. It's coming.
In our portfolio, our clients, well, pre-COVID, would be like, I'm in Europe and I forgot and it's coming.
Would you
But that's a Marin
take
problem.
a credit card? No, we won't.
We do. There's a fee. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So you call, you figure out what's going on. Number two, you review the lease. When does your lease say rent is due? Usually there's a grace period. Everyone writes their leases a little different. So you want to review what the exact terms in your lease that you signed with this tenant say to determine, are they late? Are they not late?
Are they late? And then analyze and compromise. So this is when I think you get into a scenario, but we do have a late fee for the leases for the tenants that we manage. So usually if it's just an oversight or a mistake the first time, we'll let the late fee slide. And hopefully they've learned their lesson. They've been warned.
Everyone gets one free pass in our portfolio.
Because things happen. If things have happened to us, things happen. But in the event of maybe it's something related to a job loss or a move or financial distress, then you want to analyze the problem and come up with a compromise, because getting some rent is better than getting no rent.
Well, so let's talk about this two ways.
Sure.
So let's talk about in a non-COVID time, right? Hopefully in another year, we will not have any of these eviction moratoriums in any of the states, and things will hopefully be normal. That'll be a different process you take. So
Sure.
in the non-COVID time,
Normal times,
you would serve notice, right? And it's not an eviction notice right off the bat. It varies by state, right? But generally there's some kind of notice like, hey, your rent is late, right? It's important in the case of late rent, that you start building your paper trail right from the beginning, because you never know when this is going to end up in an eviction. And it is the most common scenario, right? And the biggest complaint and the hardest one for landlords, because you need that money. You're relying on it to get your mortgage paid. So this is a big one that you have to start creating that paper trail. Like even when you, even if you're going to waive, if your policy like ours is you waive it consistently for everyone, right? The first time, we still follow that up in writing. This is your first waiver. There will be no more waivers. Rent is due on this date. Please don't let this happen again.
And you're going to want to check with your state on how to serve like a 3-day pay or quit or a 3-day cure or quit or whatever kind of notice, because they vary from state to state. And it will, and I know in California, how you serve that initial notice is going to affect how any follow-up notices like an unlawful detainer are going to be served and how they need to get involved. If you have any questions about that, consult an attorney or a professional around it.
Right. So the most common scenario we hear here with DIY landlords is, okay, my tenant's calling and they've got all these excuses and it's so hard to hear these excuses every month. So here's the problem you landlords who are kind of caught in this loop are making. You're not following this process and you're not following up with things in writing and you're not serving the notices. So even if you're going to be giving them this one-time pass, in step 4, you're following up in writing. You're making very clear this is a one-time pass you're giving them, depending on your state. This may include still serving a notice with it so that you're creating this paper trail. What you do not want to do is say, okay, just don't be late next time. You don't do that. You need to have some kind of formalized process in place so this tenant understands, even if you're making an exception this one time, you do mean business and all the rules that are in the lease are going to apply.
Exactly.
Because when they make that same call next month, if you have the same reaction, you're going to get the same result, which is consistently late rent.
And don't be afraid to go back and fall back onto the lease. So if the lease says that if they're late on day 2 or day 3, there's a late fee, let them know and then charge them. And it's okay to have a business mindset around this. People have stories. Rough things happen to people all the time. If you can hear people and understand what they're saying, but you can also say, I get that, I understand, but also I need you to pay rent on time because I also have bills to pay and I have things that I need to take care of on my end. So please understand that we're working towards the same level. The same goal here, but I need you to pay your rent on time.
Right. So the second scenario, which is the circumstances we're currently in, is all these COVID restrictions, right? So right now, depending on your state, again, landlords' backs are kind of up against the wall. You can threaten all you want eviction, but if these tenants are following the proper procedure to claim COVID hardship, or maybe your state doesn't even require that they have that, you may not be able to evict them for months on end for unpaid rent. And that certainly is the case right now in California. And that is hard for landlords. Like, we are getting these questions left and right. Is there any support for landlords? There is not. So let me tell you what you can do.
So one of the thing that you want to do is document everything. So if they're late, and in California and in our market right now, we're serving these 15-day notices of late rent
every month
or unpaid rent every single month in triplicate, posting and snail mailing and emailing and keeping one for our file. So we're doing that on a regular basis. So if and when this moratorium ends, we have a paper trail. And also inserted into that notice is a ledger showing how much rent we've received. Right now, it's hopefully they're paying the 25%, which they're supposed to be doing interstate, but how much rent we've received and how much is outstanding. We are not harassing them. I want to make sure that you understand that we are not harassing them for this unpaid rent, because we understand the state's involved and they have protections. We are just saying, hey, look, on this date, you still owe X amount of dollars and you have a balance that's unpaid, and we're looking forward to receiving that money. And every month that balance goes up and the same friendly notice goes out.
Right. So this applies whatever rules you have, whatever state you're in. You're still going to follow this 5-step process, and you're going to just start building your paper trail. Because if these tenants can't pay their rent, then eventually, when it's able to, you are going to move towards an eviction, right? But first you would call them, you'd figure out, right, what's going on. Are you going to pay? You're going to pay some, you're going to pay none. Okay, got it. You review the lease. You probably know staying rent-free is not kosher in your lease. Number 3, analyze compromise. This is where you might talk to your tenant and negotiate. Can you pay anything? Can you pay? What if I reduce the rent? What if we let you out whenever you want out of the lease? Most tenants, for the record, are not taking that.
What if I forgive your rent this month and next month, but you get back on track in 2 months, right? Or whatever that is? But then following that compromise, you want to make sure that it's in writing and they have acknowledged the new terms or whatever you guys discussed.
Right. Or the temporary terms.
The temporary
terms. Make sure whatever you're negotiating and agreeing is in paper. And then again, depending on your state, if you have a tenant who's not paying rent, you absolutely need to be consulting an attorney to make sure you are following the proper steps. Because as we mentioned in California, we have to do these 15-day notices every month in order to protect the landlord's right to eventually, someday, get this money go after the tenants in small claims for the money.
And just so you know, we've discussed this with different attorneys who are all real estate landlord attorneys and have received different answers across the board on how this is supposed to be done. And the one thing that we're just pushing is just process and consistency. We're doing it across the board. Everybody's getting a notice.
You get a notice.
You get a notice. Everybody's getting a ledger of unpaid rent. Everybody's getting something, and it's being served the exact same way because we do not want to leave any stone unturned. Next scenario, my house is being destroyed. I looked for the harshest picture I could find. I think I found it.
If you belong to any of the landlord groups online, like pictures like this, they come up on the regular. Like this is not made up.
So what do you do?
What do you do?
I got, you want to call the tenant. Hey, listen, I noticed that when I was just in the neighborhood seeing my friend who I used to be neighbors with, and I noticed that the wall in my front yard is torn down. What's going on?
Right. So you're going to figure out what's going on with the tenant.
Or I noticed a smell coming from your side of the yard. Is that marijuana? No.
Well, which is legal in quite a few states. Whatever the type of damage, just maybe, again, you may spot it on an inspection. You may have a vendor who reports back to you. It may be something you notice from a drive-by. Like we've had hoarders come up, like that gets noticed on an annual inspection, which is why we harp on the importance of the annual inspection.
Or they have furniture that's too close to the walls and now it's causing mildew and moisture buildup. Anything,
any kind of damage that you can think of, right? Same scenario. You're going to call the tenant. You're going to see if there's anything to know. You're going to review your lease. And this is the hardest part with this particular, when it's damage to your property, especially if you used to live there and you've got emotional attachment, this is the hardest part. You're probably going to have to let it go.
Yeah. You know, if you've taken enough security deposit, and I'm glad you brought that up because I've had this conversation with clients a number of times. I actually had this conversation with clients almost all throughout the year. They're like, they're just ruining my house. And I'm like, well, look, right now you can't do anything about it. And everybody's going to have their own version of what is clean and what's not clean. And someone could be living in their property feeling that they're keeping it up and maybe they're not. But at the end of the day, the only thing you can do in California, and we're in California, is wait till they move out and see how they turn it over. You never know. They could have an amazing cleaning team that's going to turn that property and make it look better than it ever looked before. And you're going to be so surprised Or if they don't do that, you have the lease, which you can fall back on. You have a security deposit, which you can fall back on and utilize to remedy all the situation, all the issues that are there.
And if you've had proper screening, you've rented to a tenant with qualified credit, so they have some skin in the game. They have a reason to make good on their debts to you and to not want to go to small claims court, to not want to go to collections, and they have a reason to want to cure the problem. So now some of these problems there is going to be a cure for, right? If, like you said, you drive by the, I don't know.
Well, we had an annual inspection at a place, and the tenant was hoarding, and we told them, okay, you're hoarding, and we served them a notice that they need to fix it, and we put a schedule out of when we're going to come back and re-inspect. They ended up doing what they needed to do, and then when they moved out, there was some damage, but the security deposit ultimately covered the issues
because we'd uncovered it during the inspection before the hoarding got too bad. And we were able, I don't think we used the term hoarding when he talked to her. I think it was, you've got a little too much stuff.
This is a fire hazard.
A fire hazard, right? So there were terms in our lease that allowed us to require the tenant to cure or to comply or quit. So in her case, we had her moving the couch away, clearing out, like there were specific actions she had to take, which she did comply with.
Removing her phone book collection from the 80s. That was awesome.
There's some gems in there, some gems.
All right, moving on. So we've got some good news and we've got some bad news. The good news is you now have an action plan.
Whatever the problem is you're having with your tenant, we hope we've given you an outline of 5 steps, even if they're rinse and repeat towards those last 4.
Let's just go over them real quick.
Okay.
You want 5? You want to call?
Call.
Review the lease, analyze, compromise, follow up in writing, and serve notice if needed. And that's like the big reg button. And
so I want to say we didn't mention before. So 4 and 5, you may have to go on a rinse and repeat cycle. Meaning if this is a violation, like a lot of people will say, my tenant brought a pit bull, right? Unauthorized pet, I'm not going to allow it. They're not getting rid of it. Well, you're going to continue to, whatever the rules are in your state, you're going to continue to serve that notice of violation, right? Follow up in writing. And then in that case, you'd be starting the eviction process when and if it's allowed based on that. But you may need to serve that a few times until you get to the point where you would be proceeding with the eviction.
Okay, so now you know. So the less great news is...
Yeah, the good news, you got a plan. The less great news is...
that these problems are symptoms of a greater issue. And their causes are, you can trace these causes back to poor screening, poor policies, poor communication, and emotional reactions.
And what we want to say about this is we're not trying to point fingers at you as the landlord, but when DIY landlords come to us with a problem, we're not usually looking at the problem. We're asking ourselves what happened 2 steps ago.
Exactly.
9 times out of 10, when a landlord finds themselves with a problem tenant, it can be traced back to poor screening, that very first thing.
Yeah, so just an example of that, when I get someone who's called me who's now needing property management, I start asking them, so what's going on with your tenant? Oh, they're not paying rent. They've got these people living there. They've got all these dogs.
They're threatening to sue me.
Threatening to sue me. I'm like, well, how did you find them? Well, my friend, they're my friends of a friend, and they seem so nice. And I wanted to help them out. Well, did you have them fill out an application? No, because I knew them.
There's good people.
Oh.
Met them. Or they didn't take enough security deposit, and now damage is happening to the property, but there's not going to be enough security deposit to cover it.
Or what does your lease say? I don't have a lease.
We've literally seen that. Or they've been there for 10 years and the lease is from 10 years ago. Or it's something that I made up. Or I had my attorney who actually works in like marriage therapy, like write it like, no, you need to use an up-to-date lease. You need to have a top-notch screening plan. You need to have policies. You need to have your own policies for how you're going to be handling your business.
Yeah, exactly. And you want to have effective communication. When a tenant calls with an issue or something that comes up, you want to pick up that phone call and you want to call back and you want to know what's going on. And again, going just down the path of this, the emotional reactions. It is very easy, especially when someone you think is destroying or not taking care of a very expensive asset like a house to go, oh my gosh, this is going to cost me so much money, and like lose your mind.
Right.
Right.
And it's always, we hear this over and over again. Why me? Why are the tenants doing this to me? How could they be doing this to me?
Exactly.
It's a victim mindset. You don't need a victim mindset.
If I had $10,000 for every owner that had to talk off the ledge, I mean, we'd be really, really rich right now.
We'd have like 3 sets of Warriors season tickets.
So, but what if there's a better way, right? And this better way comes with a shift in mindset. And just imagine for a second that your property is running more passively than it is today. It is more profitable than it is today. And more than anything else, it's predictable. You know what's going to happen on a regular basis. You can sort of infer or anticipate issues or non-issues because you've done all the things in before to get you to this place. And this again happens with a shift in mindset, and that is shifting from, hey, my rental property is a hobby, to now it's a business. You're making business decisions around your property in order for it to work better and more functional. And we have a method for you.
So we are the Landlord Code, and we are in waitlist mode. We are launching a membership, and we are launching a course. And we use our method that we've developed over the last 15 years in business, over $1 billion worth of properties served, less than 1% eviction rate. As Christopher said, we have paid the dummy tax on learning this stuff for you. And we have a method that's going to teach you all of this.
We're going to teach you how to avoid problem tenants. We're going to teach you how to manage your rental property from anywhere. And better than anything else, you're going to learn how to do it in under 15 minutes a day.
Right. We know nobody has time for a webinar, right? No webinars.
No webinars.
No one wants to sit online all day. We're going to do it all.
I mean, you can look at our beautiful faces all day long. And if you want to get the new Landlord Code hat, just drop me a line.
It's in beta testing.
But we don't want to make this too difficult for you. And we don't want to make sure that we don't want you, your time is already precious. But imagine if you can learn how to do this in a 15 minutes a day after dropping your kids off of school or going to work or coming home from work. You plop us in, you hear what we have to say, or you can watch us, right?
Either or. So we've got our founding members wait list open. Our membership is coming soon. We've got a crazy cool deal for you. When we open to the public, it's going to be $149 a month. You can still get in right now for our founding members launch at just $49 a month.
And this is a lifetime $49 a month, so long as you stay engaged with the group, but it's lifetime. And what's more is that when we drop our course, which is going to be available in March, we are in the process. We are working hours and hours and hours each week to make sure that this course comes to you. When it drops,
simple as possible, as easy as possible, as direct as possible to help you get the results that you're looking for, which is avoiding problem tenants and managing your property from anywhere.
And if by joining the waitlist today, you will also be eligible for preferred pricing on the course with obviously your membership. So
that's coming soon. We've got the link. You can sign up now if you're interested at thelandlordcode.com. And then I think we can open it up to questions.
Questions. All right. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and let you guys look at us.
Okay. And I know we had a few write-in questions from earlier. Sheila, do you want to go ahead and send us the questions in the Zoom chat would be easiest. All right.
Okay, so Lorraine H, if this is Lorraine H, what's going on? Say hi to Roger for me. It appears that evictions will continue to be banned for another 6 months. Do you know of any financial protections in place for landlords? No, not right now.
Yeah, so this is in California, because again, all states have different, though everyone has to comply with the CDC. If your state is stricter, you have to go with what your state is. In California, we always are. No, there is no official relief for landlords. I know there are a few bills in areas that are being talked through. Nothing's been done. I have heard some landlords talking about applying for the PPP loan, the most recent one that came out for small business. So that would be something to talk to your banker about, or your CPA, if that is something that would apply to your scenario. It may depend how you have it set up, and it may depend on your level of loss, like last year's revenue compared to this year. So that's one thing you can look into, but like there's no tax relief. We did a seminar on that at the end of the year. So sorry, nothing we know of right now.
Yeah, we'll keep you posted. We're watching every week, and looking at the California Apartment Association website to see if there's anything that's coming up, and as of yet, nothing.
Yeah, so that's for our state. Again, all states are different. So you do, whatever state you're managing in, you do want to be a member of your local association, because they will help keep you up to date. Every county is different. In California, we've got like a gazillion different counties. LA County is different than San Francisco County. So you may have relief in your area, or you may have even stricter eviction rules in your area. So if you belong to, they're usually inexpensive, whatever your local association is, they can help keep you on the up and up for what the specifics are to your county, for every county that you own rentals in.
Yeah, and if the law seems confusing, no matter where you are, contact a landlord tenant attorney to help give you some information. The cost of whatever that consultation is going to be well worth the money paid. So
Yeah, for sure.
just want to put that out there.
Okay, so I'll read it. Looks like we have a question from William. My question is complicated. All right, hit
You
us.
came to the right place.
My tenant who moved in with his mother passed away. His brother moved in and left April and May of last year, leaving his mentally challenged sibling in the apartment. His family is using my state moratorium to keep the apartment. He has done major damages to doors and trim that have been repaired during his stay. I really could use some perspective as I live next door. And it is a danger with him leaving a gas stove unattended and being nowhere to be found. Property manager had me turn gas off. Okay, well, this must not be in California, but winter means that also gas is needed for pipes will be. Okay, so William, if you're live, throw up what state you're in because I'm curious. There's no way that's California. So it sounds like you have an unauthorized occupant. If I'm reading this correctly, you had a tenant.
Well, I believe that if I'm reading this correctly, this person that's in the property lived there with his mother, and the mother passed away, and his brother moved in and moved out, and now he's got this tenant in there that may have some challenges that he can't get rid of them.
Okay. Well, I would say if this is, I'm a little confused about whether this person has rights to the property or not. If this is an unauthorized occupant, you would start down the normal eviction process as allowed in your state. If it's not specifically a COVID hardship, many states are allowing some kind of very slow moving eviction. If this is an unauthorized occupant, if this is an authorized occupant, it sounds like your concern is he's not mentally fit to be a tenant. I also would think that would be time to talk to an attorney, because if he is actually unfit to function as an adult, you may have a claim there to be able to get him out or have another family member step in.
To be with that person. This definitely is it also sounds like if this person is being a nuisance to you because you are the neighbor, that is also something you want to bring up with your attorney. Yeah, this is a challenging one, and it's something that you definitely need some perspective, but I definitely think an attorney is going to be the best person to give you the information and also give you the process that you need to start down right now.
And I would say also, when we go back, right, we said we always look 2 steps back. If this current occupant is not functioning as an adult, so they're considered a dependent, your original lease would have been with the mother who was the qualified occupant with a dependent. So I believe the law would look at it the same way as if it was a mother with a child, right? If that mother passed away, the child doesn't then have rights to the property, right? So there may be some area in there that if there's not an adult who's operating with an adult capacity, like then you can't have a dependent living alone in a property.
And your lease should also have something in it that states somewhere that they have a duty to maintain the property and not cause challenges or become what's the word I'm looking for? But a hazard to themselves. Thank you. A hazard to themselves. And having a gas stove that can burn down the entire building, that is hazardous.
Yeah. So that also another step you could take would be actually to call the police, right? So it's when you're functioning as a neighbor, you're talking about a hazardous concern as a neighbor. That's a little bit different, because you're saying, I'm afraid for my safety, so I'm making this other call. And you would kind of be stacking up your paper trail for what you would do to eventually, when you can, if it's not a COVID protected situation right now, move towards an eviction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right.
Complicated scenario.
Thank you for dropping that in there.
Yeah. Okay. So we've been talking for over 45 minutes here. I think if you guys have any more questions, feel free to drop them in the Facebook group, and we can answer you in our coaching group, in the free coaching group. We can answer them later. But I think for today, we appreciate everybody tuning in. We appreciate your time. You could be a lot of places today. You could be watching what's hot right now. You know what we're watching?
Mad Men.
We just totally missed
We're binging on Mad Men. But you could have been doing that, but instead you just had to see these beautiful faces. Not in the 60s scenario. I'm not going to tell Darcy to get me a drink or start smoking
it's
cigarettes.
Our office. We could, if you want a drink.
But you came here to educate yourself and elevate your game, and we want to continue that with you going forward. So please participate and engage in the group, and we will give you notice of our next training soon. In the meantime, stay safe and stay healthy. Take care, everybody.
Bye, everybody. We'll go ahead and sign off for all of our friends here.